towards a pro-people economy and trade agenda, a research conference on free trade agreements in Asia-Pacific held on January 25 to 29, 2021. The conference statement. Amid the challenging time of global recession and the pandemic, we, from 34 organizations from different countries across Asia-Pacific, representing marginalized sectors of labor, peasant, indigenous peoples, women, and urban poor, have gathered in an online research conference to discuss the adverse impacts of free trade agreements in the economy, on agriculture, national industries, monetary and fiscal trade policy, trade and foreign investment, and social and economic plan that relate to environmental protection and sustainability. We saw the negative impacts worsened by the effects of COVID-19. Clearly, there is a need to debunk the current neoliberal system and promote the people's agenda. The conference has extracted facts from on-ground experiences of people's organizations through the lens of the basic sectors, the true backbone of any economy. In particular, the plenary has reviewed the important trade negotiations in the region, the World Trade Organization, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, the Pacific Agreement on the Closer Economic Relations, including the Asia-Pacific Free Trade Agreement, the European Union Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, and the United Kingdom Vietnam Free Trade Agreement. From this review, the adherence to FTAs has only led to deeper economic recession as manifested in severe hunger, joblessness, and poverty, most especially in underdeveloped countries that are the majority of nations in the region. Many countries in the Asia-Pacific were already mired in debt even before the pandemic. However, the governments, desperate to salvage their economies, have colluded with corporations and financial institutions to roll out trade and investment programs. Multilateral, regional, and bilateral trade agreements aim to secure new markets, reestablish global supply chains, and increase production output, while investment policies intend to inject more loans, resulting in debt overhang. This subsequently intensified the rivalry between powerful nations such as the US, the European Union, Russia, and China in pushing for their own trade and investment agenda. This led to a desperate effort in securing territories and allies, resulting in heightened conflicts, militarization, and ultimately repression and violations of human and people's rights. Under the current system, corporate rule has appropriated sovereignty for their own economic interests. Instead of ensuring people's collective rights and democracy, national sovereignty is constrained by international and multilateral structures and agreements. The liberalization of trade and investment is manifested in policy reforms and processes of development which continuously undermine domestic agriculture and industries. Financial technical agreements facilitate the corporate capture of lands and agricultural systems in the region. Peasants and indigenous peoples from Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, and the Philippines are placed in a dire situation due to increasing land grabs, land conversion of productive farmlands, and land leases for corporate use. On top of landlessness, small-scale farmers are left with meager income from their own harvest due to corporate control in agriculture. They are forced to use hybrid seeds, chemical-based fertilizers, and monoculture for the purpose of increasing the volume of agricultural products for exports. This makes them vulnerable to food insecurity and further endangers their health and environment. In the case of India and the Pacific Islands, FTAs and the direct intervention of multilateral institutions such as the WTO, the Asia Development Bank, and other finance institutions has led to opening up of economies, people's resources, and lives to foreign investments and transnational corporations, allowing corporations to maraud in the forests, indigenous lands, and the seas, which has caused displacement, loss of livelihood, and irreparable damage to the environment. Indeed, without sovereignty across and beyond the region, we will not be able to attain a truly industrialized economy. Neoliberalization constrains sovereignty and people's democracy. It continuously subverts the capacity of our nations to develop. Under FTAs, local economies are stunted and binded in backward, unsustainable, and harmful production systems. Transnational corporations are exploiting the region's labor force through imposition of unlivable wage and insecure employment. FTAs have been affecting the social and economic plan of the countries in regions by imposing policy interventions on countries leading to more privatization, deregulation, and liberalization of national politics and economy. For instance, some of the critical consequences of RCEP are the inaccessibility of health and other basic social services due to its intellectual property rights provision. These types of provisions from previous and currently negotiated deals have caused inefficient responses by governments in the region in dealing with the pandemic, causing severe impacts to the local economy. From the outputs gathered from the conference plenary and workshops, the delegation has concluded that we must continue our unmitigated and close and critical watch on emerging trade agreements and progress in our research initiatives towards claiming the success of our advocacies and campaigns. 2. Push governments to junk agreements that allow corporate capture and laws that favor big businesses and transnational corporations. 3. Enact and strengthen policies that guarantee people's economic rights and sovereignty, specifically towards vulnerable sectors such as peasants, laborers, women, and indigenous peoples. This includes the struggle to achieve genuine agrarian reform, national industrialization, and independent trade and foreign policies for the people. 4. Demand to cancel onerous debt obligations to multilateral institutions and focus all finances on general public welfare and not select corporate entities. And last, junk exploitative entities that prioritize profit over the people, such as the IMF World Bank, WTO, ADB, and AIIB. Finally, we must continue to pursue our parallel struggles, local to national and regional to global campaigns and initiatives towards genuine and sustainable development, and carry on the struggle to develop a pro-people economy and trade agenda. Stronger and wider collective action is important now more than ever. We are determined to produce evidence-based research that primarily supports movements that push for a people-centered economy and trade, an economic system that upholds sovereignty and respects people's rights and democracy. We believe that without the full emancipation of nations and sectors from foreign and corporate dictates, genuine agrarian reform, national industrialization, the rehabilitation and protection of the environment, and the accessible social and basic services will not be realized. Therefore, we commit to do continuous work for the people, for stronger resistance and solidarity to fight against the corporate capture of development, plunder, and greed brought out by FTAs. No more FTAs, junk RCEP, junk WTO, fight for a pro-people economy and trade.